Hello and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to be taking one last look at my 2004 Chevy Tahoe Z71 before I send it down the road to its new owner. I've owned the Tahoe for almost exactly 4 years now, and it's been a great vehicle and served me well, but it's time to move it along to somebody else. The reason for that is actually twofold. The first is that it's starting to get a little bit rusty. Now the frame is okay, but the body is starting to rust out, and we'll take a closer look at that rust later in the video. The other reason I'm moving it along is I actually found a replacement for it. Now I've actually been keeping one eye open on the market for maybe 6 or 9 months now, just to try and find another Tahoe that wasn't quite as rusty. Haven't really been able to find anything that was at a reasonable price until a couple of weeks ago. I ended up picking up this 2007 Chevy Suburban that you see behind me there. Now we'll talk more about the Suburban in future videos. I'm sure it's going to need to be repaired at some point too. It is a Chevy after all, so there'll be videos about that. But for today, I want to focus on the Tahoe and just kind of reflect back on the 4 years that I've had it. So I bought this Tahoe 4 years ago to replace a rotted out 2001 Dodge Dakota I had owned. I actually bought that truck brand new. Anyway, I'd been looking for a replacement truck, and at the time couldn't find a truck that was within my budget, but I came across this Tahoe fairly cheap. Now, one of the things I wanted at the time was an extra back seat. My old Dodge Dakota was a regular cab and just had the 2 bucket seats in the front. So this obviously filled that need with the back seats and even the 3rd row. Now it wasn't a truck, but I do have a landscape trailer, so I figured it would work just fine. If I needed to use it for truck type stuff, I could just use the trailer. So I ended up picking it up, even though I wasn't sure I'd really like it at first, but I ended up getting really attached to this thing and really ended up finding that it fit my needs pretty well. So one of the reasons I got this vehicle so cheap is that it actually had a little bit of a title problem. On the Connecticut title, there is a statement that says mileage exceeds mechanical limits. Now, what that means is that somebody's tampered with the odometer. So I looked the truck over pretty well, and it seemed like it was in really great shape at the time, mechanically, and there was really no rust on it to speak of at the time. The guy that sold it to me told me that he thought maybe the gauge cluster had been replaced, which is a pretty common problem with these vehicles. The gauge clusters go out, and when that happens, if they can't reset it to the original mileage or something happens, then the title will have to state that when the vehicle is sold. So I think that's what happened. I'm not even sure. And in fact, I suspect that maybe the gauge cluster they put in here read higher mileage than this vehicle actually had on it. It just really didn't seem like it had gone 190,000 miles at the time I bought it. So I wasn't too worried about it, knowing that I was getting a good deal. Now the statement on the title really doesn't cause any problems with registering the vehicle in Connecticut, and the price was really low, so I was willing to take a chance on it. I knew it was kind of a beater, so I wasn't really too worried about it. As long as I could get it registered, I figured any mechanical problems I could clear up. The fact that it didn't really have a lot of rust on it is really what attracted me to it. I can fix mechanical problems. I'm not so good at fixing rust. The other problem that the Tahoe had was that I knew the front end was kind of loose on it. I had taken it for a little test drive and I could feel that it had some slop and play in there. So I knew that I was going to probably have to do ball joints or something along those lines when I bought it. But again, the price was low enough that I could justify doing those repairs without having to really worry too much about it. So one of the other reasons I wasn't really worried about having to do repairs on this vehicle is because I figured I could make videos about all that, put it up on the channel, and it would give me some content to share with all of you guys. And also I don't mind turning a wrench here and there, so it was kind of a good project. So anyway, I bought the truck, drove it around a little bit, and then brought it home, parked it over here, and did all of the front end work. I had to replace all the front end ball joints and pitman arms and things like that. I also replaced the intermediate steering shaft and the steering bushing. And I made videos about all of that stuff and put it on the channel. And I got a lot of good feedback on all those videos. So once I got the front end sorted out, this thing was all set for a couple of years. Now I know I said when I bought it there was no rust on it, but there actually was a little bit of rust. Right here on the corner of the front bumper, it was starting to rust through. And after about a year or so, that finally came all the way through to the point where I didn't want to look at it anymore. So I ended up going online and I bought a cheap replacement bumper, painted it to match the truck, and put it on. That wasn't too big of a job. And again, I made a video about that too. Now I know some of you guys are already saying this, but this Tahoe is a Z71, but it doesn't have the right valance down there. Whoever owned it before me, I think they got into a fender bender because the original bumper also had a dent in it. And I think when they replaced that valance, they either got it from a junkyard or somewhere and just didn't get the right one. They got the sort of the standard LT version instead of the Z71 front air dam, but whatever, it still works. And about 2 years ago, I ended up replacing almost all of the brake lines on the vehicle, both front calipers, discs, rotors, pads, and even the rear calipers, rotors, and pads. So the whole braking system was brand new. But again, I made videos about all that stuff, put it on the channel, and I felt good about having a good, fresh braking system on the vehicle. And along the way, there's been a few other little odds and ends, which of course I've made videos about. I replaced the evap solenoid recently. I replaced an idler pulley at one point on the engine. And I also replaced the turn signal switch because that was acting up. Every time I took a right turn, the high beams would come on. So I've got all that stuff sorted. And right now, the vehicle is actually running in top shape. There's no check engine lights, there's no leaks, no drips, no nothing. The only real problem with this thing right now is the rust that's starting. So having said all that, I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll go through and just take a last close look at the old Tahoe. First, we'll take a quick look under the hood. You can see it's got the 5.3 liter Vortec. It's run strong and smooth over the last 4 years I've had it. The only real issue was that idler pulley that I replaced. There's no ticks or knocks or anything like that. Even the exhaust manifolds don't leak. And there's actually even no oil leaks on this engine, which is actually something I can't say about that Suburban I just picked up. That does weep a little bit of oil. Anyway, I'll fire it up so you guys can hear it one last time. So looking down here, you can see the tires on this thing are actually brand new. I bought these about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago now, and really haven't driven too far on them yet. Basically, about 3 months ago, I had decided that I wasn't going to replace this thing. I was going to run it for another year. The tires that were on it were pretty bald, so I figured it was time to put tires on this, especially if I was going to haul my pop-up camper with it this season. So I bought the tires, and then, I don't know, 2 weeks later, I came across the deal on that. So anyway, the new owner is going to get nice fresh rubber on this thing. Taking a look inside, you guys probably noticed I've developed the normal GM hinge sag issue here. Not a huge deal, you just have to slam the door shut pretty hard. But the interior is definitely used, but not abused. At one time I had put some camouflage tape over this, but it ended up coming off. You can see that it's still there though. Overall, again, it's been used, but not necessarily abused over its life. So as you can see, the headliner is actually starting to fall down a bit, and it was like that when I bought it. Whoever owned this thing before smoked in here, and I think that has an effect on the glue that holds the headliner up. But either way, I've sort of glued it back a few times. It's not perfect, but you know, it is what it is. Anyway, looking down here, you can see the dash is the dash. It's pretty typical for a GM of this vintage. A few little scuffs and marks on the dash paint. The only real issue in here was caused by me. This tray here actually had a ham radio mounted in here, and to provide airflow and clearance for all the wires, I cut the back of it out of here. So things can just kind of go through here and fall in, but it's easy enough to pull this out and grab them if you have to, I guess, or go to a junkyard and find a new one that hasn't been hacked up. Now, other than my radio mod, everything else in here is clean and not hacked up. Quick look at the back seats here. You can see I got the 2 bucket seats in the back with the pass-through to the 3rd row. Now, a lot of times I had the 3rd row seats completely out of here. As I said before, this replaced a truck, so a lot of times I was hauling stuff back there. But every now and then when I had to haul a few extra people, I'd bring the back seats in, throw them in, and we'd go on a road trip or something. So now, let's talk about rust, because this is where it's starting and kind of showing up the worst. Back here on the driver's side rear quarter panel. It's not completely all the way through yet, but probably by the end of this year, it probably would start to have some holes in it. And if I actually go back and look at the door jamb, you can see there's a little bit kind of starting to poke through there. And then even down here underneath this plastic trim, you can see the rocker panel is starting to kind of rot through. Now back here, the rear bumper is in good shape, other than the fact that it got all scratched up right after I got it. The place I used to work at, the lawn crew was out doing some weed whacking and hit my bumper with the weed whacker. I wasn't too worried about it since it was an old vehicle, but I was kind of disappointed when that happened. And then just a quick look at the back. You can see everything's in fairly good shape. The vehicle's definitely been used over its life by its previous owners and by me, but not abused. So it's all pretty serviceable still. One of the things I liked about this vehicle was this roof rack. We like to go kayaking, so I used to throw the hooks on the cross rails there, throw the kayaks up on top, and sort of this roller bar right here that's on the back made it easy to kind of walk the kayaks up onto the racks. I am going to miss this part of it since the new Suburban doesn't have this type of rack on it. Then you may be able to notice right here, I did pop a hole in the roof for my ham radio antenna, but I left the connector in here so that the next owner won't have any leaks or anything like that. And then coming around the other side here, you can see there's always been a little bit of surface rust here. I painted it with some rust convert at one point, but you can see over here, this side on the quarter panel is not rusty at all. I have a feeling that this one may have been replaced at one point. This may have been in a little fender bender where this was pushed in and dented in, and that may be why this one's not rotted out yet. This Tahoe was also painted at some point. You can kind of tell this crease is in here on the side, but there's no real scuff mark in it. I think probably this was in someone's garage and maybe a kid went across it with a bike or a lawnmower or something like that, and then it got kind of painted over but not filled in. You can see evidence of it having been painted. It was peeling up here. I tried to patch it and didn't do a very good job, but there's other little spots where you can kind of just tell that this thing had a paint job at one point. And then if I open up the passenger rear door, you can see there's a little bit of rust starting to show its head here too. Up here on the front rocker on the passenger side, there's no evidence of any rust poking through under the trim, but I bet it's there if I were to pull this plastic trim off. So now I'll crawl underneath and let's take a look there. This is where it starts to get a little bit ugly. Not sure how well things are going to show up in the light here, but you can see the frame rail is pretty solid. Just a little bit of light scale on there. Nothing really to be too worried about at all. But if we look under the frame rail, especially up here under the spare tire, some of these cross members are getting flaky. And you may be able to even see some of the sheet metal on the floorboard of the back is pretty thin. And in fact, I think there's a few spots where there's might even be sort of holes starting to come through. I'll sneak under the front here and just look at the bottom of the engine a little bit. You can see just a little bit of dampness around the oil filler cap. That's probably just where I spilled a little bit or something, but no leaks or anything like that. Being the Z71, this of course had the skid plates and everything, which I never really needed. They just got in the way of everything. Now, if I pan down here a bit, you should be able to see that the frame is still in really good shape though. So no structural concerns, just starting to get rusty underneath. And then there's a closer look at the bottom of the rocker. You can see it's starting to get pretty punky there. Not horrible, but probably not going to last too much longer without needing to be replaced. So let's go under the rusty side, take a look back here. Now again, I don't know how well it's going to show on the camera, but you can see the frame is still real solid here. No issues at all on the frame. It's just all the sheet metal that's starting to rust through. In fact, you may be able even to see up here that the floorboard is starting to get a little bit soft. And in fact, up in this corner, I think there's even a hole starting right under where the fuel filler is. So structurally, the car is good. It's just the sheet metal isn't going to last much longer. I guess that's going to wrap things up for the old 2001 Chevy Tahoe. I sure am going to miss this old car, but at least I made plenty of videos along the way, so I'll be able to look back on those videos and fondly remember the old girl. I hope the new owner gets as much enjoyment out of her as I did. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. If you'd like to support my channel in another way, please consider taking a look at my Amazon store, which is linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for some Chevy Suburban videos coming up in the future.